This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. I am Trever Shirin, joined as always by Dr. Mayfield, and with the distinct pleasure of having my beautiful and wonderful wife on the show today.
Is that why you're sitting so close?
Yeah, this is Bry Shirin. And Bry, would you tell us just a little bit about your experience with teaching and what you do now?
Okay. So I am a high school math teacher at a local school in Colorado Springs. And I've been teaching for just about 5 years, so getting into that veteran status. I'm sure there are lots of teachers out there that are listening to this, and they're going to be like, 5 years? You're just a baby. But when I look at 1-year-old teachers, I'm like, no, you're the baby. I chose math, not because I was good at it, but because I actually really struggled with it. And in high school, I was in honors classes, so I had that going for me, but I didn't necessarily excel at it, and I really did have to work hard, but it was that perseverance that kind of led me to anybody can do math. You just got to put in some effort. And so I chose math, and that degree was really, really hard, and I would never do it again. Which,
just to stand up for my wife a little bit, in the state of Colorado, you have to get a degree in the content that you're trying to cover, not in teaching that content. And so Bry has a math degree with a minor in education.
Emphasis in secondary education.
There you go.
That makes my brain hurt.
Yeah. She got to a point when we were dating and she was finishing the degree where you weren't working with numbers anymore.
No. There was no numbers. And I was like, how is this a math degree? It was just a lot of proofwriting. And, I mean, you'd be talking about numbers, but the numbers would not be in your proof. So it's very interesting. But, yeah, I chose math because I realized that I struggled with it. And because I understood that struggle, I could be a better teacher. Because in my experience in my math degree, what had happened was they'd be so high up in their level of understanding of mathematics that they would just be right over your head. And because I had understood the struggle, I can better support the kids in my classroom that are really struggling with math.
Well, why teaching? So why did you choose? I mean, that's why you chose math, but why did you choose teaching?
Okay, so I chose teaching. Number one, I mean, your parents model so much for you. And when I grew up, my mom was a middle school math teacher, and I just admired her, and I wanted to be like her. And so she was the first one. And then my brother became a teacher. My other brother became a teacher. Then my dad became a teacher. And they're all kind of in the math realm. One of my brothers teaches or taught high school math. Now he's an administrator. My other brother teaches English, so he's like the black sheep of the teachers. And then my dad taught engineering and auto shop. So there's a lot of like STEM focuses in what they taught. But so that was modeled for me, and I really didn't know that other jobs existed. But I became a teacher because I felt a calling on my life, and I love high schoolers, and I just felt like I could meet kids where they are and that I had strengths in explaining things. I'm very literal, and that helps a lot of the time because math can be very straightforward, and it doesn't have to be all fluffy, and I feel like I can really explain it well.
Now, there's this concept that we hear, sometimes not very overtly, but we hear it, and it's pervasive in our culture, that anybody can be a teacher, and that it's not a skilled job or an admirable job in the same way as like a CEO or a business person or a lawyer or things like that. Can you talk a little bit towards that idea that anybody can be a teacher?
I would just say, let's just try it out.
Oh, gosh. Seriously.
Oh, yeah. Come to my classroom, please.
Right? Yeah, I mean, seriously, because I've met people like that. There's like, well, anybody can be a teacher. The whole, if you can't do, you teach. I'm like, that's the dumbest
right.
Seriously.
freaking thing ever.
I mean, you just a lot of people, I think, have this misconception that they're really good at explaining things. And it's not true.
Nope.
There are some people that you're like, I have no idea what you just said, and you're trying to teach me something. So I don't believe that anybody can be a teacher. I do think it takes a certain skill set. Number one, if you're a teacher, you are for sure not doing it for the money because there isn't any. So it's not a highly sought after job
Wait, you're
in
not
the
going to
first
get
place.
rich?
I'm sorry?
You're not going to get rich being a teacher? I mean,
Rich in life skills and love. rich in experience.
Well, can you share with us a little bit of some of the things that make teaching distinctly difficult? Because I think, like, whenever we go into an idea of a career, it's important to recognize the things that make it difficult, the barriers, the hardships.
Got it.
And I think teaching probably has some unique ones that would rule out some individuals.
Okay. The first one that comes to mind is that you are not only teaching them content. So you don't go in there and just teach them math. You're teaching them life skills, and you are having to respond to what they're bringing in the classroom. So they could be having a lot of issues at home. They could be going through tragedies or just trauma in general and learning about themselves. I mean, they're high schoolers, for goodness sake. They barely know their bodies. They're still, finishing out puberty a little bit, and their brains aren't fully developed. And so they are a very difficult population where you have to respond to their mood changes. You have to try and understand where they're coming from and what they're bringing to the table, and then meeting them where they are, and then teaching them math, which they hate. Oh, man, I'm teaching them math. You could be teaching them something else, but just teaching them anything on top of their important social life and their, all the stuff that they do on social media, Snapchat, Instagram and stuff, and, Face app, but that's not really. But just their focus is not school. Their concern is not school. And I say this from experience because as a teacher, I've been recognizing just how selfish I was as a high schooler and just thinking about like how I only thought of myself. I didn't consider my parents. I didn't consider others. I was only concerned with what I wanted to do, and how things affected me. And so it's hard because those kids are in the same mentality and they don't think about me. So they lash out at me. They yell at me. They scream at me. They get frustrated, not recognizing that I have feelings too. And I've had to have a couple of hard conversations with students of saying, like, I'd pull them aside or outside of my classroom and have conversations like, hey, I want you to know that I hear these things that you're saying and they hurt me. Like, I don't like listening to that. And I want you to know that I'm human and that what you're saying isn't kind. And I would just request that you keep those thoughts to yourself or just refrain from talking about me in my own classroom. Save it for outside.
Save it behind my back.
Yeah, I don't care. Just not in here, not where I
Well,
can.
and also you're talking a lot about focusing specifically on certain students that are struggling, but I know that you have a vast array of number of students in your classroom. What's the most students you've had in one class?
So just due to some difficulties with scheduling and stuff, my school has started each year with classrooms full of 40 to 48 students. And they're built, I have 36 desks, so that makes it really challenging. My class sizes on a typical basis are in the 30s. Like, that's a normal class size for
Which is
me.
still way too many.
I know, but now when I have, I think this past year I had a class of 21, and it felt so small. I didn't know what to do with myself because I've only taught in classes of 36. Like, that's my average. But each school year I start with 40, and that's...
As they're trying to disperse the kids evenly.
Yeah, try and fix schedules because it's circumstantial because it's changing of grade book systems, and there's been difficulties in that. So giving my school some grace here. And plus, I get to know more kids that way, which I like. They at least know my name for 2 weeks.
So it sounds like, going back to the everybody can be a teacher thing, you have to have emotional intelligence, you have to have patience, you have to have character, you have to be thinking on your feet, you have to be problem solving while teaching.
And know the content.
You can know the content, you got to manage people.
Yep.
And that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of grading and
seriously,
all that kind of stuff.
Creating homework.
Yeah.
And,
creating tests.
And here's the
everything.
thing, too. Like, there's this concept that teachers don't exist outside of the classroom until you meet them outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
Like, you don't realize that
They
they're
don't
a
have
person.
lives.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I married into a teaching family, and I didn't realize that teachers write the homework that they assign, but they also do the homework that they're assigning.
And they have to have the right answer.
Right. And it makes sense, but I had never thought about it before. So Bry is doing all of the homework that every one of her students has to do.
For multiple math classes.
For multiple classes. And not only that, but she wrote it all, which is, yeah, it's.
No, I would just like to preface that I have a team of teachers that I work with, and we write it together. I don't want to take full credit for it, but we definitely split up the work to make our life a lot easier. But just going off of what Mark was saying, it is a lot of jobs. I'm spinning like 100 plates in my, while I'm walking around my classroom, and there are so many thoughts going through my mind because not only do I have all of that stuff, but I also have to respond very quickly because students will come up with ideas that I could run with in a really good way of like, oh, you brought up something that's so good that I didn't plan for and I can talk about that. Or just responding in general to whatever they bring to the table. I'd also like to say that yes, there are school counselors, but a lot of times teachers are the first line of defense.
Yep.
And I have a coworker who has the biggest heart, and she responds to kids in a way that I want to, and I don't necessarily know how because it's just not necessarily a skill that I currently possess. Just like empathy is something I'm still working on. But she'll have conversations where kids are telling her that they are suicidal or they're pregnant or they're in an abusive relationship. And that's hard in and of itself because we don't have the counseling training and yet we have to respond. And a lot of times it's just listening and then taking them to the school counselor. But like we're a safe place for them and we're mandatory reporters. But it's also just like you have to have some tough skin for that. And you have to have tough skin in this game anyways because parents can be difficult. Students can be difficult. You have to have tough skin because you're gonna get yelled at some point.
Yeah. That brings up two things that I don't think we very rarely talk about or think about, and one of them is that mental health is such an issue in our state. I think we've said this on the show before, but Colorado ranks 48th out of 50th as far as mental health and mental health access and
like
all that
worse.
Worst.
Okay.
Right, so it makes sense that you guys would be the front lines because we're a shortage of school counselors, we got a shortage of this, a shortage of that. But then the other thing that comes to mind that we don't talk about very often is that our society has pretty much abdicated our role as parents to everybody else except for the parent, right? And so not only are you pseudo counselor, but you become a pseudo parent and all these other things. And I don't know, it frustrates me that teachers don't get the respect that they deserve or need.
Yeah. Parents have such an opportunity to bring their children up in ways where they learn skills of respect and understanding and just how to respond socially in general. And I think it can be really challenging as a teacher because I've found myself having to be a parent, and I'm only 26 and we don't currently have kiddos, and I'm parenting kids that are like 10 years younger than me. Like that's it. So I'm barely qualified to be an aunt, and I'm trying to parent these kids not because I want to, but because I'm finding myself having to. And I'm even teaching kids something as simple as I remember having a student ask me, what does MRS mean and what's the difference between Mrs. and Miss? And like, you just think sometimes that these things are so intuitive or that they would have run into it early on in their life. And I know that seems silly, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind about teaching them a couple of things that are just like social norms.
Well, no, you and I have talked, and I think the three of us have talked at times about just the life skills.
Yeah.
Budgeting classes and what is it, I'm a junior, I should probably think about like applying for colleges, and my parents aren't, all those things that should be happening in a home. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, however you look at it, are falling on your shoulders too.
Right.
Well, and I want to touch on something before we run out of time. you mentioned we're talking about parents, and I'm really curious because I think that a lot of our listeners on Candid are parents.
Yep.
And otherwise community members that are involved in students' lives or their neighbors' lives and want to support.
Intentional people listening to this, not the lazy ones. But
right.
that are,
there's some intention behind this.
The people who care are listening, which is good.
And so I really want to explore a little bit of, as a teacher, what are ways that the community and specifically parents can support you? What are the things that, like the questions that they can ask at the parent-teacher conferences that get to what you want to be able to talk about, or the things that don't seem as helpful, or the ways to, because I mean, there are a lot of situations where a kid's getting a really bad grade and the parent's concerned and the kid is saying that it's all the teacher's fault and they're an awful teacher, and that paints the view. How can they approach you in a way that allows you to be honest about the kid and to interact in a way that's positive?
Okay.
So a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Dive into that however you like.
So first and foremost, just in terms of being a parent and supporting kids in terms of school, is just talking to them about it. I mean, it's not your responsibility to maintain or keep track of their homework and, make sure that they're doing it necessarily.
At least in high school.
At least in high school. I mean, there is some responsibility on the students at that point, but you can be having conversations with them of, do you have any homework? Is there any way that I can support you in it? Are you getting the help from your teachers that you need? Because, I mean, you can hire tutors. That is a thing. I mean, I tutor on the side too, but at the same time, teachers are either there before school, at lunch, or after school, ready to support kids, and we are not used. Like, I go home early because students don't come and get help, and I'm there for them, but they don't take me up on it. So knowing what the teacher offers, so actually reading the syllabus, I know that seems silly, but all you guys are signing a syllabus, and I know that those parents are not reading it because they come in to parent-teacher conferences and they're like, what's your policy? And I'm like, I get that it was like in August that you read this or didn't read this, but here it is again. So
make a copy, put it someplace for easy access.
Copy. It's posted on Google Classroom. Feel free to download it. But yeah, knowing the resources, even things like Google Classroom or Schoology, those are programs that teachers will frequently use where they upload resources or documents. Parents can get attached to those, so find out from your teacher how to do that, and that way you can track your students electronically. Actually look at their grades and keep up on them monthly, weekly, whatever you need to do. I mean, I feel like a lot of student athletes keep up with their grades because they have to maintain a certain GPA in order to be able to participate. But the students who aren't in something that's CHASA sanctioned, that's like the sports association for those of you who don't know. If they're not in those kinds of clubs, they don't necessarily have any reason to maintain their grades other than graduating. So actually checking up on your students' grades is super important. As far as what to come to parent-teacher conferences with, I would bring your child.
Why?
Because they are the ones responsible for their actions and what they're completing in the classroom. And by a parent coming on their own, you're not getting the full picture because you're getting one story at home, you're getting one story from the parent. But one story from the teacher. If you are all three together or all four together, if you bring both parents, you can have an actual conversation. And a lot of times what I'll do in parent-teacher conferences, I will have the student tell me how they're doing. Like, I'm not going to start this conversation. You're going to start the conversation. You're going to tell me how you think you're doing.
What responsibility and accountability?
Some autonomy?
Seriously.
Wow.
Man,
what's that?
I have this sign in my classroom that I made a couple of years ago, and it's massive. And it just says, I am responsible for my own learning. And I'll have kids ask me about that, like, why did I put that up? And it's primarily because I want them to recognize that nobody else can learn this information. I can't learn it for you. I've already learned it like 10 times. Over 10 times. I can't learn it for you. All I can do is present you the information. That is my job. I can present you the information. I can try to support you in it. But ultimately, if you don't put effort into this, you will not learn it. Honestly, one of my biggest pet peeves of just teaching in general is that so many of these kids are so capable. Like, I see the potential that they have, and I try to encourage them in it, and I just say, if you put in the smallest bit of effort, I promise you, you will get this. But guess what? It's going to take time. I mean, I've really tried hard that when students say, I don't get this, or I don't understand this, I chime in with the word yet at the end. So they'll say, I don't get this, and then I respond with yet, because you will get it. It's just going to take time and some effort. But that's motivation and just the understanding that they're responsible is a really big difficulty in high schoolers right now.
It starts at home too. I mean, with the responsibility, boundaries.
Absolutely.
You can't play Fortnite however long you want for how much time you want.
Yes. Please make your kids go to sleep.
Right.
At a decent hour.
So, I mean, I grew up in a house of teachers as well, and I mean, I don't know if you call me a teacher as a professor, but because it's not at all as hard, not as hard as what you go through.
It's an education.
Adults are hard to teach too.
Well, that's true. That's to some degree. But I always saw my mom and dad going out, and we had enough to pay the bills, but not enough, for extra stuff. But they'd always go out and buy supplies and colored pencils and markers and poster boards and little treats and toys and that kind of stuff. I'm assuming it's the same. I mean, it's the same. Like, what would you say is the biggest need for a teacher when it comes to support, and that kind of stuff, whether it be encouragement, but also I think, it's a real issue that our government isn't supporting teachers the way they need to from a supply standpoint, from a funding standpoint, and that kind of stuff.
Right. I would say that, number one, going back to that syllabus, on there it would say like items that teachers request. At least I know that I put that on my syllabus. And honestly, most of the things that I'm requesting are things for your students. I'm not requesting them for myself. I'm not saying, hey, buy me this, buy me this. I'm saying, buy your kid this. I don't have tissues in my classroom. If you want tissues throughout the year, you need to bring them. And I try to offer incentives of like, I'll give you a homework pass so you can get out of doing homework if you bring me a box of tissues. Like something like that. But I mean, simple supplies like that I put on my syllabus are things that you should pay attention to for your teachers.
Syllabus.
Read the syllabus.
First.
Yeah.
It's a common theme I'm hearing.
I'm reading. I feel like I haven't really recognized that myself. Like sometimes I forget what my syllabus says. I'm like, did I write that in there?
It's not just the parents.
Yeah.
No, so simple supplies like that. I would also say that as a high school teacher, because I grew up with a middle school teacher, I anticipated getting gifts for Christmas. And I know that seems silly, but I was excited to get some Christmas mugs, because I just wanted some Christmas mugs.
Or fake wooden apples you could put on your...
Yeah, something. But as a high school teacher, I get nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. I think I got something for Valentine's Day one day because a girl just brought me a stuffed animal, and I was so excited about it.
And where's that stuffed animal now?
It's in my classroom. Like, I try to make it hang on the TV, but it falls off frequently, so it just sits on a table. But even just simply loving on your teachers, really encouraging them. I'll get some thank you notes sometimes, and I really appreciate those.
And she keeps them. As a husband of a teacher, I see Bry come home with thank you notes from students and or parents, and the demeanor and the strength that she comes home with those with is much greater. And I could probably go through her office at our house and track some of those down to this day.
Right.
There's one that we talked about, the first note that she got from a student.
First day of school. First day I ever taught.
And she still has that note somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, but it comes up every once in a while. And now that student has graduated, less so, but that I could see how meaningful and how encouraging a simple piece of paper with some encouraging words was for her. And to advocate for my spouse, who's a teacher, and her coworkers, who I've come to know, if you just write a simple note to kids' teachers, or if you're a student listening, writing a note to your teacher and just acknowledging the work that they put in and gratitude for them taking time to invest into you.
Right. One of the things that I really want kids to know is how much they are loved and cared for by their teachers. I've had conversations with students because I also do Young Life at my school, which is a club. And I've had conversations with kids in Young Life about how I've thought about if a student in my classroom had committed suicide or had completed suicide and how much that would impact me. Because I would have thoughts going through my mind of what could I have done? How could I have shown them that I loved them more and that they were cared for and that they were worthy of love and this world? And I had a student respond to me of saying she had suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation and had not considered her teachers after me having said that, and having considered all of the people in her life, no matter how small the impact that they have, would be affected by your absence. And so I want the students to know that they're cared for, and I also want them to return that care and show that their teachers that they care for them and that they love them and that they value them. Because even those small words of affirmation keep us going. I mean, teaching is a really difficult profession.
Yeah. Well, that's why when you said 5 years, I'm like, good job.
I know, seriously.
Its burnout rate is high.
I had 1 year where I think I cried almost every day, and I look back on that and I say to myself, how am I still a teacher? I don't understand it, but here I am.
Good job, Trevor.
Yeah,
man,
there's a
I did.
lot of support at home.
Being a supportive husband.
Yes.
But it is, yeah, it's no joke. I can't, my parents both did 40 years. I'm like, I don't know how, you know. But if you're right, if you're called to it, and if that's where you're supposed to be, I think it's a good place.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things I just want to admonish our listeners is we're getting close to finishing up is school starts soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
for some districts in Colorado, the very week that this is coming out.
Nice. Well, I want our listeners to go, what can you do to bless a teacher this semester, this month the school starts. But I don't know, one of the things that I wish we would do, and maybe we can from this platform and from other platforms, but go like, what can you do to encourage a teacher once a month?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a gift, but it can be a thank you note, a note of encouragement, a hey, I see you. And,
even just talking to them. Yeah. I mean, they are humans.
Right.
You can talk to them about their lives and have conversations that don't have to do with your subject.
I mean, and that's the thing. Just like counselors, we don't do this to get accolades, but it's nice to be seen.
Yeah. Right.
And to go, hey, I know this is not easy, and you're doing a great job. Yeah. Even something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and parents, keep in mind that your student's teacher is not your teacher. And so there's probably some transference happening where the parent's like, oh, I don't want to talk to my teacher, but it's not your teacher. So think about that.
Yeah, teaching has changed quite a bit since you were a kid. So,
Definitely. And I mean, in high school, kids can have up to 7 teachers. So, if you just love on a teacher once a month, you'll get all of your teachers in a year.
Yep. Well, Bry, thanks for coming on. Thanks for what you do.
Yeah.
I've been able to be over at your school a couple times, and good kids.
Yeah.
Not easy, but good kids, and just thanks for keeping up the good work.
Yeah.
Just help me love kids. That's all you guys got to do. That's all the listeners got to do. Just love on them.
Yep.
That's all they need.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.